Now we have a camera motor. But if you noticed, if you had clicked the player and you had the player clicked, then the camera motor will become a child of the player. The player will be the parent object. So that's going to create adverse effects. So whenever you start, you'll see all kinds of, shaking and jerking of the camera, because it does not need to be a child of another object. It needs to be kind of by itself. So I just like to take the camera motor just for good measure, and I like to drop it off up here by itself. This way I know where it's at, and it's not on anything. It's not being a child of anything or disrupting it. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and hit play. Alright, so you can see just as easy as that, you're just adding two things to your game, and already we have a player that can walk around and can jump. He's actually running. Actually, we have the run checkbox checked in our player controls in our in the inspector when you click on the player. So let's jump, and I missed the cube. Like a noob, I missed a cube. So you can see we can jump on this cube, and we can't do much else now. We can just kind of jump, and we can't move the cube. The cube is kind of too heavy at the moment. So I'm gonna click off the play button for a second, and we're gonna go ahead and do something kind of custom here. We'll go ahead and quickly click on our cube. If you look at our cube's options here in the inspector, we can click the mesh renderer and turn it off for a second, and click gizmos at the top if you don't have gizmos on, and you'll notice that you can see all the kind of hidden icons and elements in the game. And you'll notice that the box collider here is still on, and that's actually what the character is standing on, and what you visually see for the cube's color and everything like that is just the mesh. So if you so interesting enough, and you don't really have to do this, but I'll just show you quickly that if you was to add the cube to the player and make it a parent again, and you reset the cube, and you'll see that it inherited the position again, like I mentioned before. And then we take the cube and we can unparent it, and we'll just move it up in 3D space. We'll also move the player up in 3D space. Let's see, move him up just a little bit more. Yeah, there you go. And then if you was to hit play now, you'll notice the player is standing on the cube's box collider, even though that the mesh is not visible at this time. So we'll go ahead and add the click on the mesh render back if you followed along with me, but if not, you're fine. So we'll go ahead and move the player back to where he was, or she. I don't think it has a gender at the moment. Our little robot guy here, or girl. Robot. So this robot is, we want it to be able to interact, and we have this cube over here. So let's go ahead and at the top we can click our scale tool and click this green tool, and we can just kind of bring it down until we have what what looks like a baseball base. And then if you click the move tool, we can actually move it down with the move tool. And you don't want it to go below the scene for demonstration purposes. You just want it to be a little bit resin up there, raised from the plane. So I'll go ahead and hit play. Just see if I have it like I like it. Yes, I do. And go ahead and turn that off. And I will drag this blue material. Again, you could go to material, right click on material, create your material, and change the base color, and then you can drag that into your scene. And we have our base, our blue base now. And you can, if you wanted to, instead of cube, you could call this blue base. And you could call it blue base, and you could leave cube in there, or you could take the cube off. It doesn't really matter. I'll just go ahead and leave the cube in there so you know that it originally started as a cube. Okay, so let's look at, let's press F on our keyboard to look at our cube base, because I do want to show you something. If you click Mesh Render and turn that off for a second, you'll notice that the box collider now has conformed to the shape, since we changed the shape of the object altogether. And what I want to do is I want to click the Edit Collider, and there's a button right here that can edit the bounding volume of the collider. You'll notice that there's dots here that has shown up on our box collider, and if you click the middle one, or it's actually the top upper one on the top of the cube, or the base in this case, we'll just click that and bring it up, and you can bring it up to kind of a nice amount here. I messed up and I clicked off of it, but we can always click and edit the collider again, and I'll just bring it up to a nice amount, just enough to where the player would be able to walk into that. We're kind of making a just a collider, but it's kind of like a trigger in this case for what we're setting up. You can actually, right now, the player, if they went over to jump on, and let's go ahead and add the mesh renderer back there so we can see our base. But right now, if the player walked over to it, it could actually jump and stand on the box collider and look like they were in midair. But we don't really want that, so we're going to make this box collider a trigger for right now. And once we made it a trigger, you can see that we can walk on it, and we can walk right through the trigger, and that's what we want. Okay, so let's go ahead and add something with Game Creator now. At the top, we can click our trigger, but we'll make sure that we're on our player. So click the player, and we're going to add a trigger to our player. And you'll notice right away, if you look down, that there is this spear collider that has appeared as a trigger on our player. And if you click the arrow with the move tool, we can actually bring that up and kind of put it around his waist here, or the bot's waist here. Alright, so we have our player with a trigger collider on it, and the trigger collider is a parent, or it's a child object of the player, and that's fine, because we want the trigger to move with the player at this time. And if you notice, we have our trigger options here. We have a spear collider, which is the round object that is showing on our screen. And we have an option here, and you can change the platform if you were having this for any specific game, but if you leave it on any platform, it should work for just any platform that you are making a game for. But you can change the trigger type, because you see it says on start, and whatever actions we put on this trigger to trigger or make happen, they would be happening on start at the very beginning of the game when you hit play. Sometimes for certain actions like movement or some other things, you might want to add a little bit of wait time in your actions to make sure that the actions that the game has time to kind of render those actions. But we'll get into all that later. We just want to change the on start for now. And right now we have, you can see if you look down the list, you'll have all kinds of things that you can do, or trigger types that you can use for various purposes. But we're going to use the, just type tag. We're going to use the on tag enter for now. Okay, so what is it wanting? It looks like it wants on tag trigger. That's the title of it, and it wants an object with a tag. So this trigger is essentially waiting for an object to collide with it, or for you to take it. I mean, in this case, it's attached to the player, so we're actually taking it over to collide with something else, correct? So for the object with tag, we're looking for a specific tag. So let's click back on our blue base cube, and we'll notice that at the top, if you see that there is a tag option here, and it says untagged. So there's lots of tags that I have so far, but we need to create a tag. So click the drop down menu here, hit add tag, click the plus, and I'm just going to call this cube. You could call it anything you like, but let's call it cube for now. And you could you could set this type of thing up for like an enemy, and you could have all your enemies tagged with a certain tag, just enemy tag, and then if you shot an object over to your enemy that had a certain trigger on it, then you could cause some actions to happen to that enemy. But for now, we're gonna just we see we've added cube there, and now if we go back over to our trigger, the object that we are looking for is a cube. So you'll see we have cube in our list. So let's go back real quick to our cube and make sure that the cube has the correct tag of cube. So we've tagged the cube with cube. Simple enough. So this way our trigger knows whenever it's entering it that is actually this object has that specific tag, and it knows to trigger the actions that we're going to add in a moment. So the object with the tag is definitely going to be cube that we're looking for. We could store the object that is hit, which could be in this case it would be the blue base cube, and when we store it in a variable, we're kind of marking it. We're keeping that information inside of a variable just so that we could you could have it check a condition or something and see if the cube has been hit by the trigger, and if the cube is there, we could have some other actions happen based on the variable detecting that. But And you can do a local variable and a global variable, and the difference, and also a list variable, but the difference between the local and the global is the global works between scenes. So if you go to a different scene and you have a variable set up, then it's going to recognize that. But if you do not require that, you can just create a local variable to hold some information for you. So we'll be looking at that in a minute, but we do not need to store the information for now, so we'll ignore that. And then we could store the collider, so we could detect, you could have this trigger detecting what collider it's collided with, but we don't really need to do that either. So really we're just looking for the correct tag to be on the action, and we're gonna, or the object that we collide with, or trigger collides with in this case, and just just launch some actions right off if that's true. So let's go ahead and launch our actions. So you can click create actions down here, or we could right click in our scene and go to game creator and click on actions, or we can actually click the actions at the top here. And you know, there's many ways to do it, but when we're in our trigger, the easiest way is to just go down here and click the actions slot right here, and it will add actions to this trigger. And if you click on the trigger drop down menu that it's created right beside of it, you'll notice that it has populated a blank spot for some actions, and it's called the game object action, and it's now a child of the trigger. So if we look at our trigger and it's looking for a tag, and we've tagged the cube base, so it's going to launch these actions right down here. We have not created, if you look over here, there's another tab to create conditions, and if you create conditions, you'll definitely want to put those conditions in front of your actions, so it will look at the conditions first and then consider the actions, and the actions can flow through your conditions. So technically, if you were going to put conditions, you could actually just put condition here and then have it flow through to actions, and then there's no need to actually add actions here, because actions can actually be anywhere in your scene. You can actually put them anywhere, this game object of actions in the scene, and as long as it's in the proper slot of your trigger or your condition, it will activate those actions when the condition fires, or you know, when the conditions are true, or when the trigger is set. So let's go ahead and click our actions and see what we have. We have no actions added yet, so what we want to do right now is, when we click our actions, you can see that there's lots of actions that you can have happen, all based on various triggers. So let's click variables for now, and you'll notice there's lots of different things that you can do with certain variables, but we're going to use a variable number for now. And you know, we haven't created a variable yet, and that's fine, because we're actually going to do that right now. But you'll see at the very beginning it says assign number to unknown. So it's assigning a number. It just doesn't know what to assign. You'll see that there's a value, and that's the amount that it's trying to assign to this variable. But it doesn't know which variable you want to use, because we haven't inputted anything at the moment. And here's the, it says global variable, but we can actually change that. So go ahead and change that to local variable. And you'll notice what happens right away. It's looking for an object. So because it needs an object, we'll go ahead and create our variables. Just right click, it's really simple, to go into the hierarchy over here, and right click and go to game creator variables, and you'll see local variables right here. And we can leave this as local variables. You can name it something else, but I like this for it to say local variables or local variable if you're just going to put one in there. But you can use this